Hi, welcome to Talkin Business. I'm Joe Catrambone. I'm CEO of the Stuart Martin County Chamber of Commerce, and it's my pleasure today to have one of my favorite people, George Stokus, Assistant Martin County Administrator. And George, I'm so happy that you took time out of your busy schedule to come and sit here for a while with us and be on my show, tell people a little bit about yourself, tell people about what's going on in the county, and other things that you may want to discuss and talk about.
Sure. Well, thanks for the invite, Joe.
Yeah, my pleasure. This is fairly new, so you're one of my first guests, so to speak. I'm working my way through, but I wanted to make sure I got people of substance, obviously, and people who are entertaining. And oh, by the way, George you never have to be out of work because he could be a stand-up comedian if he wanted to be. His timing is great, his humor is great. That's probably why I like him so much. But George, tell us how you ended up coming to Martin County and from where.
Well, I went to college in Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, Illinois. I went originally. I wanted to be a pilot, Joe. I wanted to fly 747s all around the world, and I went to pilot training. I'm a certified flight instructor instrument, 1,000+ hour pilot with multi-engine, commercial ratings, IFR ratings. I'm a flight instructor instrument, so it's scary. I always tell myself if I ever run into any of my students on a flight I'm on, I'm not going. But I probably have about 400 to 500 students in my logbook that I have to keep until the day I die in case they mess up. Hopefully, that won't happen. And 9/11 happened, and that really shifted the industry. And I think that was one of the first big shifts. And I remember my mother said, "You better have a backup plan." And so I took.
She was a wise woman.
She was, yeah. Well, I have a little of that attention deficit too. So I took every class in aviation management that university offered, and I got into airport management. It was kind of something that stuck. Came out, graduated in 2002. I wrote a letter to every airport in the state of Illinois, and at the time my parents had moved to Orlando, and my parents moved to Orlando in 1999, and like pretty much every millennial, because I'm a geriatric millennial according to the magazines, I decided let's move back in with my parents. So I wrote a letter to every airport in the state of Florida, and I only got 3 responses, and one of those responses was Lakeland Linder Regional Airport, and they offered me the high wage of minimum wage of $5.15. Wow, now we're at 15 for minimum wage. I was making $5.15. And that was a pretty good gig, 40 hours. I got to drive the wonderful Chrysler K car from the early 80s around the airport. I really got my hands-on experience, and it really, I learned so much in my internship at Lakeland that it really has kind of shaped where we're at, and I know we're going to talk about some of those temporary employment opportunities later. And, basically did my internship. Still wanted to go into flying. Was flying for AM 580 and Kissimmee Aviation out of Kissimmee Airport. Did a little bit of that, and I also did a little bit of consulting for the airport at the time. And while I was flying, I hit 7 sandhill cranes. I still hold the bird strike record at Kissimmee.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It put a heck of a paint job on the airplane. And I had to be in the air by 6 a.m. and fly. I used to fly 8 hours a day, and I flew everything from, if you can imagine, going into a little 2-seater airplane to the next thing you know, you're flying a DC-9, and my job was to do test flights and make sure the mechanics did their job. And I always grabbed the mechanic that did the work and put him in the plane, because if I'm going down, he's going down. And, so we did that, and I did that for a while, and 6 months went by, and a guy named Ron Yak, who was my chief pilot, he was kind of my mentor for flying, and he offered me a job for $14,000 a year. I too could fly for a living for 14 grand. I was going to be stationed in Nogales, Mexico, which the living was cheap, but you're in Nogales, Mexico, and And I don't think there was air conditioning in the hotel either. And at that same day, I got offered a job at Roanoke Regional Airport. And to quote Lewis Black, it was my first job, so I hated it. I did all the grunge work, and I had to be like, if you remember the Dunkin' Donuts guy, gotta go make the donuts. Since I was the new guy, once I had gone through my 30-day probation, my job was to open up the airport. I literally let TSA in to check people. So I did that. I have to report to work at 5:30 in the morning. Do you know what doesn't rise at 5:30 in the morning, Joe? The sun. You never see the sun at 5:30 in the morning. But did that for about a year. Kind of grew to the maximum point I could get at that airport. And an opportunity opened up at Kissimmee Gateway Airport. And for those of you who have been in Florida for a while, Hurricane Charlie decimated Kissimmee Airport. So I worked for 7 years at Kissimmee Airport. I was literally their fastest hire. They interviewed me on, I think, about a week before Hurricane Charlie. Hurricane Charlie came in. They held an emergency meeting. I got hired on Saturday morning. My mother called me and said, "Congratulations. Looks like once again as a millennial, you're moving back in with me and your stepfather." So I moved back in with them, and I love my mother. She really has shaped who I am. And I remember I'm literally there the second night, and my mother says, "Welcome home. You have 6 months to get out." So I worked my way up, bought a house, worked at Kissimmee, met my wife, got my master's degree in Kissimmee. Worked there for 7 years, and like a lot of things, just reached the maximum capacity, my maximum position. And a position opened up at Whitham Field. And what's interesting about Whitham Field is when I was in college, I did a thesis. A lot of people don't know this. I did a thesis on Whitham Field because at the time it was labeled as one of the top 100 most endangered airports in the United States. And our professor made us write a business case of how you would transform your assigned airport into a thriving airport. So my first semester I picked Whitham Field, and my second semester I picked Juneau, Alaska. So I think I worked out well on the weather part
No
there
doubt.
with Whitham. And I applied for Whitham Field. And in case for those of you in the listening audience that want to know whose fault it is that hired me, it's Taryn Krisda, who's currently the county administrator, and Bill West. So if you don't like me or what I've done at the airport, you can blame Bill West. I always tell people it's all Bill's fault. So, and I came to Whitham Field in December of 2010. I told my boss at Kissimmee I had accepted this position. And he looked at me and he used an explicitive word and he goes, "You must be nuts. There's nobody in their right mind wants to come to Whitham Field." And I thought, well, I really look forward to a challenge. So we really enjoyed it. I came down. My wife was really hesitant coming from Orlando down to Stuart. Much different feel. I started the job. I was amazed that they kept me employed for more than 90 days. I always thought I would barely make 6 months. And, worked at Whitham Field, got a lay of the land, got to work with great people like Dan Capon and David Smith, who I believe are both members of the chamber. In fact, my first function as airport manager, which this must have been a sign, is I had to attend a funeral for a gentleman that owned a flight school. And my wife said, "Really, your first thing you're going to do and take me to is a funeral and a celebration of life." And what was interesting is that gentleman had 2 girlfriends and a wife who all met at that celebration of life, which David Smith can concur with this story. And so can Scott McDonald, who I don't know if he's a
Sure.
member. We all kind of had a laugh. My wife was very perplexed by that whole thing. And my wife did say, "Wow, this must be an indication of your career if your first thing is you're going to a funeral." And but it was good food. That's a big important thing. It was a good food, and I believe there was an open bar in the hangar because pilots and alcohol and planes, they all go well together. Not too much, but and so anyway, worked that for about 5 years, and brought Whitham Field at the beginning of really the recession. We had about $40,000 in the bank, and we were struggling. We had a lot of issues that we had to make up. We had just spent a lot of money in the EMAS, Engineered Material Arresting System. And we, with the help of Miss Spalding, who just retired 2 weeks ago, who I could definitely not be where I'm at without her, as well as you, Joe. You've helped me out quite a bit.
Oh, thank you.
And we worked real hard. I remember it was just Pat and I for a while there, and Pat and I were using carbon paper. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's you write and then there's like it's a copy thing, and they're great because you can smell the paper. And
I remember a big controversy, and one of the things that I think a plus for you is that you think like an entrepreneur. You
Yeah.
think like a business person, and that's unusual. And I don't mean this for a bureaucrat to think like an entrepreneur.
well, it is. It's very odd.
And
yeah.
so I remember the controversy over the customs. Oh, it was a boondoggle. It wasn't going to work. It was just another ploy. It's actually making money.
Yeah, it made $65,000 in the month of March. It will. I think last year it made about 85,000 total in profit, and that was with customs doubling their fees that year. So, I got that, Joe. When I worked at Kissimmee, I worked for a guy named Terry Lloyd, and Kissimmee Airport was its own enterprise fund, but it didn't have the business. It didn't have as much business as Whitham Field did, or at least the serious nature. And Kissimmee, when I went to start Kissimmee and we went into the recession, I believe Osceola County at one point had like a 38% unemployment rate. So we worked real hard on that business perspective, and I learned that business is important, customer service, making sure that you can make money, make sure things are sustainable. So
we've got to wind down.
Oh, okay.
But before we do, I wanted to talk a little bit about Career Connect. Maybe we'll do that at another time, because I think more importantly, from your perspective, there's a big change going on at Whitham. And
Yeah.
aviation is one of our targeted industries. It's our economic
Yeah.
part of our economic engine. So with the new changes you see with the new FBO and what do you see?
the way I tell people, Joe, is I look at when I came into Whitham Field, we were kind of like a young adult, not even a young adult. We were still kind of a teen. Now the airport's maturing. Now it's really starting to figure out, okay, it's a really serious airport. We pump more fuel in the Whitham Field than all the rest of the airports in the region combined. We have some very serious industry. And when I started at Whitham Field, one of my goals was to get 10,000 jobs at that airport. And Sam Carver has taken that baton and moved along with it. And I think in the next, you look at the Whitham Field in the next 10 years, it's going to be an even bigger economic generator. 7 jobs for every 1 job at an airport is the average right now. It produces a little over $1 million per day in economic revenue. I think you'll see Mr. Carver and his staff do a great job at, maybe doubling or tripling that over the next 10 years. And I think we go from just being a destination airport where folks live and come here, but to also now they're getting their planes worked on. Now it becomes a center of innovation where we test new technologies that are used in those industries.
Do you think it's ever possible, and I know you don't have a crystal ball, but just knowing the background, ever possible there's going to be a commercial flight there?
No, it's not built. The airport's not big enough. It's not built for it. There's too much competition around us. We are going to be a community-friendly general aviation airport for probably the next foreseeable future, 50, 60, 70 years. I don't see it ever changing.
I feel that way too. I just wanted to see from a professional who's on the inside how you felt about it. I'm just a layman looking in. The other thing I wanted to touch on, George, and I want to thank you for Career Connect Martin.
Yeah.
Again, entrepreneurial thoughts. You got a recovery grant. You knew we were having trouble. People can't hire employees. You asked us to put together a grant proposal to help with job creation. It turned into a contract, but needless to say, we're putting people to work, and it's thanks to you and Career Connect and your entrepreneurial idea to carve a piece of that money out and be able to fund Career Connect. So I want to thank you for that.
Well,
Whatever success we get it started with you. So
myself and the Board of County Commissioners,
of course.
You know, it's important that, you know, you mentioned the business aspect, and I'll kind of leave you on this. You know, it's no matter what we do, I've learned from folks like you, Carolyn Davey, Ted Astolfi, you know, from both the local to the national, regardless of the social issue, it all focuses down on one thing, and that's the economy. And looking at taking care of the economy, and that needs to be at the forefront of our minds in the government office. But more importantly, you know, we get these government funds, and they're grant funds, but they're temporary. And the way I look at it is, I need to invest them into the community so that you can do your good work and get folks working, because that's got a lot longer ROI, or return on investment, than what we can do with just government funds and government handouts. And I think that's what's made Martin County special. I think that's what's made me be able to work in Martin County, is that political philosophy. And regardless of everything we do, it always comes back to it's the economy. And I think someone always used to say, I forget the 60 Minutes report, we used to always say it's the economy, stupid. So I really feel like I should have a poster in my office of it, because I say that all the time to my staff. But I appreciate you giving me the time to share a little bit of my life.
I appreciate you taking time out, George.
Looking forward to this. Seeing
Thank you
this
so
on the
much.
web.
Yep, thank you.